Hi, in this video, I'm going to go over the source object in Simio. Really, the main point I want to get across in this video is how do we change the arrival mode to control how and when model entities arrive or are generated in our system. Okay, so let's get started here. What is a source object and its main function? So if you go on Simio, the source object looks like what you see on the screen there, and it's really the main object that really drives the simulation model. Is in it creates the model entities that are really typically the main thing that causes the simulation to run. Right? So for example, you want to model a operation of a store. You have to have customers arrive to the store. The customers are going to be represented by model entities, and those model entities have to be generated somewhere, and that's what the source object does. Another example is if you're modeling an airport, you want to model the passengers arriving at the airport. That process could be represented by a source object generating the model entities, which are the passengers. Another example is parts entering an assembly line or production plant. So the source generates using some kind of interarrival logic of when these parts are generated. Side note here, the source object is not the only object that can create a model entity. There are other ways to create a model entity in Simio, but this is probably the most common way that you're going to use, common method to create model entities. Okay. Really, the key property that we need to understand when we're using the source object is the arrival mode. This controls when and how entities are generated. There are 4 different arrival modes: interarrival time, time varying arrival rate, on event, and arrival table. So I'll go through each one of these one at a time. Let's go to Simio. I'll take a quick look here. I'll show you, show you the source object and these arrival modes. So this is the example I'm going to use to demonstrate some of the concepts here. I'm going to click on the source object here and show you the arrival mode. As you see on the right here, on the properties window, under arrival mode, there are 4 different options: interarrival, time varying arrival rate, on event arrival table. So let's get started with our interarrival time. So interarrival time. Entities are generated based on the interarrival time specified in the interarrival time expression. So when you set the arrival mode to interarrival time, you have to give it some kind of a time or like an expression that represents the interarrival time. For example, let's say the interarrival time is 5 minutes. What does that mean? That means that an entity is going to be generated every 5 minutes. Okay, so if this is like the timeline starting at 0, the first entity gets generated 5 minutes after the clock starts, and then after the first arrival, the second arrival happens 5 minutes later, and then the third one happens 5 minutes later, fourth one, and on. Okay, so this is an example of interarrival with a deterministic interarrival time or fixed interarrival time. Okay, so let's demonstrate that in Simio here. Let me go back to Simio. So I have the source selected, and you can download this example from the website. The way this example works is that I've created an indicator here telling you after one arrival of a model entity, this tells you the time between the arrivals. So you'll see in a bit when I click run, when the first one goes in, it'll start at 0. When the next model entity arrives, this will tell you the time between the current arrival and the last arrival. And I've already set it up so it'll be automatically converted into minutes. So let's click on the source object. I'm going to make sure the interarrival time, the arrival mode is selected as interarrival time. I'm going to change the interarrival time to, I'm going to set it as 5 minutes. Okay. So again, what this means, what should happen when I press run is these entities should arrive every 5 minutes. It should be generated every 5 minutes by the source object. Okay, and this indicator will tell me whether whether difference is indeed 5 minutes. Okay, so let's run that. Okay, so there's the first one. Okay, every 5 minutes, right? So every 5 minutes, there is an entity that arrives. Okay, that little difference 4.9 is just when I'm using a state assignment to a variable when that variable gets assigned a value. So that shows you the slight difference, but it is 5 minutes. Okay, so that's deterministic 5 minutes between arrivals. Okay, let's change. So we gave it a value of 5, right? But this doesn't have to be a given. It doesn't have to be a deterministic value. It could be an expression, right? So for example, it could be a random dot normal. Let's see, 10, 2. Okay, so what does that mean? Let me go back to the slides and kind of walk through that with you. So let's say I have interval time of random.normal 10, 2 minutes. So that means the time between arrivals is on average 10 minutes, and the standard deviation of that number is 2 minutes, and the distribution is normal. Okay, so you kind of imagine each arrival doesn't have to be a fixed number. It's going to change, right? So the first one, T1, let's say it was 12 minutes. Second one could be 2 minutes. Third one could be, let's say, 7 minutes. The fourth one could be, I don't know, 3 minutes, etc. Right? If you take all of these different inter-arrival times, this will have a normal distribution with a mean of 10 minutes and a standard deviation of 2 minutes. That's what this is saying. Okay, when you set the arrival mode to inter-arrival time and set the expression as random.normal 10, 2, you're saying the interval between arrivals is normally distributed with a mean of 10 minutes and a standard deviation of 2 minutes. Okay, so let me go back here and let's try this out. I'm going to run this. So when I run this now, this number here, the time between arrivals, should be changing. It shouldn't just be fixed at 5, right? So I'm going to run it and let's see how this changes. So it's going to change every time, but we know on average, it'll be 10 minutes with a standard deviation of 2 minutes. Okay, so if we were to capture these values and create a histogram and graphed it, and would have seen that it'll have a normal distribution with a mean of 10 minutes and a standard deviation of 2 minutes. Okay, so that's okay. Let's do another example here. We go back to the slides. Okay, how about if we do random.exponential 6? Okay, so what does that mean? So this is basically a post on arrival. Okay, with the rate being not 6 per time unit, it's actually 1/6 of time unit. So Simio expects you to put in the mean value inside the parentheses. So if you want to do a post on arrival, and let's say lambda or the rate was, let's say 10 per time unit, then what you input inside the parentheses will be 1/10 or 1/lambda. Okay, so Simio requires the mean input, not the rate lambda. So rather than doing per time unit, as you probably are familiar with, you have to give it a mean time. So you just have to flip the value. Okay, so if I want to do a post on arrival with a rate of 6, where lambda equals to 6, for example, I would put random.exponential 1/6. In this case, when I put random.exponential 6, that means my lambda value was 1/6. Okay, so let's go back to the Simio. Let's try that out. I'm going to change the expression now, the source here. I want to do a post on arrival. So let's do random.exponential with a mean of, so let's say my lambda was 1/6 per time unit, then 1/1/6 means 6 minutes, right? That's the mean between arrivals. So then this will be a post on arrival. Okay, so I'm gonna run this. So the time between here, this value will not change more. And if we were to take all of these values and plot it, it would have that exponential distribution that you're probably familiar with. Okay, so this is probably the most common way to create model entities, introduce entities in your system using a source object and using the interarrival as your arrival mode. Okay, but there are other ones. So let me cover the other ones as well. So let me go back to the slides here. Okay, the next one I want to look at is the time varying arrival rate. Entities are generated based on a table where each row represents a time interval. Okay, so the table looks like that. I'll go into Simio and show you where you find this. The thing about the time varying arrival rate, I think a lot of people make a mistake on. these rate events per hour, these are not deterministic. Okay, so if you put, for example, 8, doesn't mean that you're going to have 8 arrivals in that interval. Okay, what you're telling Simio to do is the arrivals between that in that interval has a arrival rate of 8, and the arrivals are Poisson. Okay, so basically this is your lambda value. Okay, these are your lambda values. And it's always, the rate's always in per hour. Even if you change the interval to 30 minutes or 2 hours, etc., the rate you're going to give it in the table here is always in per hours. Okay, per hour. Okay. So the arrival mode is time varying Poisson arrival. That is the arrival with Poisson, but each time interval can have a varying rate. The rate, events per hour, the Poisson arrival, this is an hourly rate regardless of interval selection. The value in each row is the lambda value. Okay, so let me go back to Simio here and demonstrate this. So I'm going to go into model 2 here. I should have already set it up already. So if I want to go to the source here, and let me start from scratch so you can see how I do this here. Let me start the interarrival time. So let's say I want to do a time varying rate. Okay, where you find that table is under data, under rate tables. I've already created here, so let me delete it. I'll make a new one under rate tables. Okay, I'm going to create a rate table. Okay, and then this gives you the 1 hour intervals by default. You can change this interval from 1 hour to something else if you want. Okay, so I can even do, I don't know, like, and it's 30 minutes or 30 hours. Okay, let me just keep it as 1 hour. Okay, but you can change the interval. Whether it doesn't matter how you change the interval though, this column, the rate will always be in per hours. Okay, so I'm going to set the first value to 5 and the next value to 50. So what should happen is you have a Poisson arrival with a rate of 5 in the first hour, and that rate jumps to a rate of 50 per hour in the second hour. Okay, so I'm going to facility view, and so I've changed it here where now this indicator tells me the number of arrivals. Okay, and I've set it up where this value resets every hour. Okay, so let me put a status label here so we don't get confused here. Oops, I'm sorry, I don't need that. Let me go back here. Let me put not a status label, but a label. Okay, number of arrivals at current interval. So every current hour, basically, right? Okay. You know, just a simple, let me put number of hourly arrivals. Okay, simplify. So this will reset every hour. And I've done that by using the add-on process and using a timer. It'll go off and it'll reset the value to 0. So every hour, this should say 0 again. So I'm going to set the time varying rate here. So I'm going to click on source 1. I'm going to change this to time varying arrival rate. And the table I'm going to do is the rate table 1. So I'm referencing this rate table 1 now. So it'll look at 5 and then 50. And then from hour 2 to 3, there's no more events. Okay. And this table will repeat within the simulation model. Okay. If you keep running it longer than the interval you specified there, the length, it'll repeat. Okay. So I'm going to press run here. We should see this number start off smaller for the first hour. It should jump for the second hour. Okay. So let's run this. Let's see how fast this goes. Where is it? So I'm going to pause it right before the 1 hour mark. So 0.99. I currently have 7 events. So remember, it's Poisson. So even with the rate at 5, it's not going to be exactly 5. It doesn't necessarily have to be, right? So right now we had 7 arrivals in the first hour. Let's see what happens for the second hour where my rate jumps from 5 to 50. Okay, so let's press run. So reset. Now you see the second hour. You have way more arrivals now. I'm gonna pause it. Okay, so we're at 1.96 hours. We're already at 38. Okay, so if you have a time varying Poisson arrival, okay, you have a Poisson arrival that's not non-stationary, right? So every hour it exhibits a Poisson arrival behavior, yet the rate changes. Then you would use this time varying rate and this rate table to represent that. Okay, so this is also a very useful way to model the arrivals in your system as well. Moving on to the next option, arrival mode on event. So this is another way of doing the arrivals. And as the name suggests, this is, there's a few ways to do this one. Basically, you can make the arrivals happen based on some kind of event, like, I want the arrival to occur when a timer goes off, okay, or some kind of event that triggers the source object to generate an entity. Okay, so like an example would be like an event element or a timer element. Or you can do like, when an entity enters a certain node, this will create the creation of another entity. Okay, that's one way to do it. So I'll show you an example in Simio here. In this example, I've set up two sources, and source one is going to generate default entity based on an interval time of 5 minutes. So what we saw in the first example. And right now it can go to either this path 2 or path 3. So it can go either to sync 1 or sync 2. So what I want to do is the following. Every time a default entity enters this path here, I want source 2 to generate model entity 1. Okay. So if default entity goes this way, nothing happens. But if it goes to sync 1, I want model entity 1 to be generated by source 2. Okay. So I'm going to go into source 2, and I can change this to on event. Okay. So right now there's a different option of triggering event. I'm going to customize this here. So I'm going to go to definitions, and I'm going to go down to events, and I'm going to create an event. I'll just leave it as event 1. Okay. So what I want to do then is the following. Okay. Every time an entity enters path 2, I'm gonna trigger that event. Okay. So before I do that, let's go to source 2. I now have an event called a trigger event named event 1. Right. So I'm gonna select that right there, event 1. Right now, though, we don't know. We haven't set the logic to trigger this event 1, but when it does, we know it'll generate event 1. So if I run this right now, that's gonna happen, right? You'll just have things generating from source 1, but nothing else happens. Okay. So let me speed it up a little so you can see. We should only see source 1 generate entities and nothing else happening. It's moving a little fast. Let me pause that really quick. Let me stop it, and then now I'm gonna change the logical length of these, or the so that we could actually kind of tell whether, so it won't go by so quickly. Okay, so try that again. Kind of see it, right? Nothing happens at source 2, right? Okay, because even if we said do it on event 1, we haven't set up the logic for event 1. Okay, so I'm gonna go on. There's multiple ways to do this. Okay, one way you can do it is go into path 2 and do an add-on process trigger. When something exits path 2, that means it's going into sync 1, right? Okay, so when path 2, I'm gonna double click on exited, and then I'm gonna put a fire step here, and then I'm gonna trigger event 1. Okay, so what that means is when a model entity leaves path 2, it'll fire event 1, which then fires source 2, right? Which then triggers source 2 to create model entity 1. Okay, so let's give that a try, see if that works. So once this model entity hits sync 1, we should see, there it is right there, right? Okay, so let's see. Let's wait for another one. Hopefully once this model entity hits sync 1, we should see another one get generated. There it is. And we'll see another one get generated. There it is. Okay, so this is how you generate, when you set the arrival mode to on event, this is this is an example of using the on event arrival mode to generate entities in Simio. Okay, now we're on to the final example, the arrival mode, the arrival table as an arrival mode. Entities are generated based on the values in a column of a data table. If the data, if a date time property used, the simulation returns a time span from the starting data simulation to itself. If a real or integer property is used, then the arrival will occur at the simulation time plus the numeric value of the property. And so arrival table is also very useful. I'll show you the example here. So you got to start by creating a data table. Okay, so let me go to this example here. I'm not sure if I set it up. I already did. Let me remake this table so that we can see this together. Go look at this together. I want the source to use an arrival table now to generate the entities. So I'm going to go to arrival table. There's an error message because it's not connected to anything. So now I'm going to go to data, go to tables, and I'm going to add a table. Okay, so you got to specify a column in this table that Simio can use to generate those entities. Okay, so I'm going to go to property. Let's make both of them at the same time, and I'll show you the difference here. I'll create a date and time one, and then I'll create a, let's do a real value. Okay, so the first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my model and look at the clock here. And right now, by default, the clock is set at August 2nd, or the simulation time is set at August 2nd, 2021, starting at midnight, 12 a.m., right? So I'm going to go to my data table and set up the arrival events based on this reference here. Okay, so I'm going to go to data here. August 2nd, oops. August 2nd, and let's say the first arrival, I want it to be, I don't know, 12:45 a.m. Okay, and the next one, let me copy this down here. Next one, let's say I want it to be, I don't know, 01:30 maybe. Oops. Okay, and the next one, maybe I want this to be, I don't know, 1:50 maybe. Sorry. Okay, and then for real party, I'll just set up a value here. I don't know, 0.5, and then this one let's do 1, and then this one let's do 1.75. Okay, I'll use both. You see the difference here. So the first one, the first arrival should occur at 12:45 a.m. The second arrival should occur at 1:30 a.m. The third one should occur at 1:50 a.m. Okay, let's try that out. I'm gonna go to facility, back to the facility view, click on the source, and I'm gonna change my arrival time property to table 1, date time property 1. So I'm referencing this column over here. Okay, so once I run this model, I should see the first arrival occurring at 12:45, the second one at 1:30, and third one at 1:50. This tells me the time between. So the first arrival will be 0. The second one happens 45 minutes after the first one. Okay, so let's press run. Okay, nothing happens for a while. Let me speed it up a little bit here. Even faster. Okay, so that 45, right? Let's, next one happens. Okay, 1, and then there it is, 20 minutes. Okay, so the first event happened 45 minutes after midnight. The second one happened 45 minutes after the last one. Let me change this so you can kind of tell the difference. So it's easier to tell the difference. Okay, let me retry that again here. Let's wait a little bit, and you should see the first event happening. And the second there, here it is, 45, and then second happening at 1 point, there it is, 35 minutes after. And the last one happening quickly after that, right? There it is, 30 minutes after the last one. Okay, so that's using the actual date time. Now I'm going to use the other column instead, the real property. So the first one should happen 0.5 hours after when the simulation starts. So in our case, it'll happen. You can just look at the lower left-hand corner at 0.5 hours, and then at 1 hour and 1.75 hour, we just see these numbers change. Let me change this to 0.6. Okay. Right, so then you should see 0.6, and then the difference 0.4 and a 0.75 shown here. Okay, I'm going to change the logic, change the reference here from date time property to real property 1. And let's press run. So look at the lower left-hand corner, you can see the hours here. Okay, once it hits that first value in our column, there it is, 0.6. And then the second one occurs right there. And then let's see the last one happening. There it is. Okay, so that's how you use the arrival table method for the arrival modes. Okay, so I've shown you all 4 different ways of using the 4 different arrival modes in Simio to how to generate model entities. So you can use either one, any one of these 4. There are other ways as well, but this is probably the most common way you're going to generate entities. And that's it. Hopefully this is helpful for some of you. And yeah, check out some of the other videos. Hopefully it helps you in whatever project you're working on. Take care.